moving so fast. It's moving so fast right now. Hey, everybody. I am John, your host for today's episode of Let's Chat. I'm the director of community here at Twitch, also a broadcaster in our space for the past 20 years. And the grade just keeps coming in stronger. Before we kick off the show, I like to do a quick check with the chat to make sure that we're coming in. Oh, look at this. Hi, everybody. Hello. The way to really show a hello on any /Twitch show is to showcase those dino motes. Who's got dancing dino in the chat? I want to see y'all post those right into here. I want to make sure we got dinos present. Oh, there's some dinos. There we go. That's what I love to see. Welcome in. So the purpose of this show is to dive into conversations around the broadcaster journey, things that we experience as broadcasters here on Twitch, and have conversations with all of you in chat as well, for things that you might be figuring out on your journey and exploring as you go. And I'm very excited for today's guest. We have the one and only Steve Saylor, a broadcaster, an educator, and a professional from our space for many years. I think they've been doing it as long as I have. Let's bring Steve on the stage. Steve, how you doing,
Hey, John, how are you?
Always good to see you, and always glad we get opportunities to chat. We obviously get opportunities to chat in person and all throughout the internet, but I love having this stage, especially to talk about your journey, because you've been doing this quite a while, and you have many learnings that not only you've taken into your own shows, but also that you've shared with people over the years as an educator. So let's start with a quick introduction about you and your experience.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, like you, elder statesman in the content creation game. I've been making content online since I think like 2005, 2006. So coming up on almost 20 years of experience, and I've done everything. I've done podcasting, being a YouTuber, blogging when that was sort of cool back in the day. Even audio blogging. I've written podcast novels. I've created like radio shows. I worked in radio for the longest time, and now I can within the past going on 6 years now, a Twitch streamer as part of that too. So what do you want to know? That's basically everything in a nutshell.
Let's start off, because obviously, like, all the skills that you've maintained over the years navigating the professional circuit, it's very similar to me in that I landed into Justin TV and into Twitch after doing all of that stuff in the traditional circuit. But now finding this home on Twitch, I guess, what are some of those differences that you found with your experience doing radio, doing podcasting, and then coming into a space like this? I guess, what are some of those observations that you've made?
Here's the thing. I actually don't see a lot of difference. I mean, of course, like when it comes to some of the radio side, obviously the visual is a big part of that. But when it came to streaming live, when I was working in radio, I worked in radio for like about 10, 15 years. I saw the potential of, like this is pretty much not that different from an actual full-on radio station broadcasting, whether it's a morning show talking about their lives or just things that are happening. The only extra element is that there's cameras happening. And now, like, I was kind of like, even working in radio, I saw the writing on the wall that was like, we need to get in on that. And I tried with a few stations in Toronto to try to be able to jump into that streaming space. But, of course, copyrights with like music and stuff like that was a big issue, and still is even current at the time. But I think that a lot of broadcasters now in the radio side, or at least in the traditional broadcast side, are seeing Twitch as like, this is a thing we need to sort of jump into. Now every morning show has a podcast or is streaming on Twitch or on YouTube, or just as a content creator outside of just the traditional radio signal. That it's like, okay, cool. I was a little bit early, but just didn't have much to show for it at the time, because being a peon in the radio biz means that you don't get the sort of the say from your general manager. But hey, you know what? I'm glad I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Well, when we think about like even the tech evolvement over the years, like I remember having to hack together USB devices in order to capture games in the early era, and then it became about like the Hapage, and now we have all of these tools readily available for broadcasters. People use their Elgatos or their Avermedias to capture in games way easier. We think of like all the different bells and whistles of even lighting systems that they're making for broadcasters and everything now. Teleprompters, I saw, was a recent product that came through. It's interesting to see the evolvement over time, where people are realizing this is a medium that they need to lean into if they are doing those audio only portions. But being one of those early entry folks like yourself, like what were some of the challenges you were up against when you first stepped foot, let's just say, into this visual medium?
I'll just say the first challenge was learning how to code. That was the first one, because at the time there was no services. You can just, it's no Spotify for podcasters. You can just upload an audio file and it will just do all the podcasting stuff for you. No, you actually had to learn what was called XML code, and you had to basically learn how to like enclosures and item tags and all like everything. You also had to know how to run a website, because you had to have a place to upload audio or like any video file. You also had to encode a web player, because this is pre-YouTube, really. Like I jumped in. My YouTube channel will be officially 20 years old as of next year. I jumped in the same year as YouTube started, and because it was the first time that we saw, oh, you can actually upload video for free, and you have a Flash player that you can just embed on a website. Oh, we need that. And it was just became so much easier, instead of having to upload like 15 different video files of like one at 320p, one at 480, and all of that stuff. So I think it's just the process. I guess the biggest change is that it's gotten much easier and far more complex, and honestly rivals a lot of traditional broadcast media. I mean, you mentioned like some of the technology we have today. I mean, a lot of it comes from the broadcasting world. Like I have the Elgato prompter. That's been a mainstay in television for decades. So being able to have that, and even expand beyond just this traditional prompter, where you can have your chat embedded in it, or just it has its own display where essentially you can have like your Zoom call or Discord call up in there, and you're looking directly at the camera whenever there's a meeting, like stuff like that. Let's be gone beyond that. I think part of that is it's just a new way to be able to broadcast than it used to be. So I love seeing the change over years. And I'm like, people kind of ask me, it's like, sometimes it's like, do you kind of wish how it was back in the day? It's like, sure, yes, because if I started then I would be much bigger now. But honestly, I prefer now than as opposed to then, because the technology has gotten easier and just better.
Yeah, no, I think the ease of access is obviously why a lot of people are now flocking into live broadcasting behavior. The ease of getting the toolkits, the ease of getting up and running, starting a show. You could start literally with just your phone. You can go live right now if you wanted to on Twitch or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. There's all these services now making it easily accessible. But I feel like with ease of accessibility and ease of access to toolkits, there could be pitfalls that people fall into pretty quick. Like, for example, people think, I got to invest into the greatest equipment right out the gate. I have to look sharp in this way. Like, I guess, what are some of those pitfalls that you think people might fall into, like thinking, I have to do this if I'm going to go live for the first time?
Yeah, I think it essentially is that. It's like you need sort of like the best in tech equipment that you possibly can. You need like all the lights, all the cameras, all the the colored lights in behind you, or like everything needs to be super broadcast quality. But when I was teaching college, I was teaching this sort of exact thing of social media and how to be able to like properly use it, not just being like, here's how to tweet in 240 characters. Actually, at the time it was 140 characters when I was doing it. But one of the things that I tell folks who are just jumping into this for the first time, or just if you're looking into, okay, I've got a setup, but I want to be able to upgrade, what is the first thing I would look into? The first thing I always will say is audio. Upgrade your audio, and whatever you can be able to afford, get that sort of the USB microphone, because it'll be far better than any other like laptop mic or headset mic that you currently have, because people will forgive bad video, but they cannot forgive bad audio. If your stream or your content sounds bad because either the mic can't pick you up, or there's too much background noise, or there's static because the microphone isn't isn't grounded, so it's not, which is a technical term. It means it's not really like it's getting interference from the electricity, and it's interfering with the actual signal that's going into your computer to record, or your phone to record, like stuff like that. You basically like you're gonna have like people will immediately switch off or swipe up, whatever, swipe away just from your content because of that. So if you're looking into upgrading at least something, upgrade your microphone first, but everyone today now has a smartphone, and honestly, your camera is so much better on a smartphone than some of the webcams that are out there. So you can totally stream using your webcam or sorry, your phone, and basically like a console hookup to your to Twitch, and that becomes so much easier. So yeah, if you're looking to upgrade equipment, you don't need all this fancy gadgets, whatever. First thing is, use your phone or and then upgrade it's like a basic USB mic or whatever you can be able to afford.
I love this. And you actually got double tapped in the chat by Con Devil saying how they had started out, using just a laptop, no camera, just like the mic on the laptop. And that was a great start for them.
Sure, of
course.
And
I think that's a great way to get started, is just by always starting with something minimal when it comes to your broadcasting behavior. You can always add on more. I know we look at like all the bells and whistles that start to appear on people's shows, the alerts popping off, stream avatars sometimes appearing on mine if I'm doing a DJ set. There's all these extra things you can add. You can always add on. But starting at the core of what you're broadcasting is how you start to get those people in the door and like, okay, what are you talking about? Like I see people even like coming in and like, oh, what's the conversation today? Is it for them? Is it not for them? That's one of the things that you can easily set forward, especially if you have strong audio. Just communicating the message of what you're there for is key to start. And so like, I'd love to talk about like, Steve, when you first came into Twitch, what were you broadcasting at the start of it? Coming from obviously professional sector, getting started on Twitch, did you bring more of that radio show, talk show vibe? Did you go straight into games? Like what was that allure at the start for you?
Honestly, it actually was gaming at first. I did know sort of a little bit, and you were talking about, kind of using the basic equipment that you have with you. When I first started streaming, I actually used my PS4, and I had a PS4 webcam as basically my camera. But the thing is, I also had this. Yeah, of course, I had this like Shure SM7B microphone, which is We're
rocking the same one.
Yeah, it's such a great microphone, but it can be expensive. So don't. Yes. It's not the thing you buy when you're first getting it. But I found I found out that you can, if you connect it to a USB interface, you can actually be able to plug it into the PS4 directly, and it will work as the regular microphone. And so I added that little extra just to kind of like make my stream sound a little bit better. But it was streaming Destiny 2. And my best friend T, or he goes by the T Monster on Twitch. He was playing Destiny 2 on stream, and I hadn't got into it before. I knew of it, but I hadn't really got into it before. I hadn't really streamed at all, and I just hit him up and I was like, hey, I've been seeing you play this game. Would you be interested in, maybe guiding me through the game, and just like I can tag along. We can maybe both stream at the same time so people can get both POVs. And would that be okay? And he goes, well, that's, it's great. I love the idea, but I'm gonna suck just as much as you are. It'd be like the blind leading the blind, and I'm like, that's what we're gonna call it. And so we just call that show Blind Leads the Blind, and we're just stumbling together in Destiny 2. And I started that in October of 2018, and just been have been kind of streaming ever since. Eventually I added on, I tried a bunch of different things here and there, and I love the sort of the just chatting category. It's kind of been my sort of bread and butter for the past a couple years now. But I always have that. I'll just keep jumping back into Destiny and keep playing. But I play a whole bunch of other games as well. But even now I'm just starting up even a brand new thing that's been kind of sort of fun to sort of dive into. But I've just been doing that ever since.
Well, I want to talk about your new show, and I love the shout out you actually got from Rock Nasty. Steve, you're a champion for accessibility. Hats off to you. And I want to shout that out here, in that you are a major supporter of innovation for accessibility when it comes to the gaming sphere, and especially when it comes to the streaming sphere. I would love for you to just talk a little bit about that journey. And I think that will lead into the show that you just launched, which I'd love to talk about. So let's start with just the importance of accessibility when it comes to services like Twitch, when it comes to broadcast mediums, or even just gaming in general. Let's talk a little bit that.
Sure. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I am an accessibility consultant in the video game industry. So I started doing that. Actually, it was funny. I started a YouTube show called Blind Gamer, and it was essentially a conversation. It started off with a conversation with my friends. I kept telling them for years that I sucked at games, and I just was like, you know what, I'm just going to show them proof. So I basically decided to, I had some friends who worked for a magazine that basically had all the capture equipment and stuff, and I just basically just started recording stuff from there and putting them up on YouTube. This is back in 2015, and then as I started kind of doing it, and it started kind of getting a little bit popular. Then other folks within the gaming industry were like finding my channel, and they were like, well, hey, how do we be able to make games more accessible from your perspective? And I started being reached out to by studios. I started being reached out to by Ubisoft, by Xbox, and then eventually I did a few consulting gigs here and there, and then that led into it was actually a panel that I was doing in Toronto with a few folks from Naughty Dog and from Xbox and Ubisoft, and I realized that on stage I literally had an epiphany that I've been telling people for years that I sucked at games, but in reality it was that games sucked for me. And I immediately was like, okay, I am so in on accessibility. I need to be able to I change all my content around it, and reviewing and previewing games from an accessibility standpoint. And basically what kind of really shows it, like I always say, like accessibility is for everyone, because you never know when you might need a feature or an option that is available for and designed for specifically disabled players, but can be used for anybody. And I sort of use an example like subtitles now. Like everyone is using subtitles in games. That was designed essentially for deaf and hard hearing players. But when developers started to kind of leave the subtitles just on by default, like there's already been studies that have proven that 97% of players will keep the subtitles on, and guaranteed 97% of players aren't deaf or hard hearing. So and it just goes to show, like, and as we kind of developed over and over again, just as each sort of game kept coming out and with adding more and more accessibility, I started to kind of use that as an education piece on Twitch to play games and sort of talk about my experience playing it as a blind / low vision player, and also just my experience within the space. Like I'm not saying this to brag, but just to kind of add to the chat, to basically the kind of, I do know sort of what I'm talking about, is that I have credits in The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. I've worked on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, as well as Watch Dogs Legion, and I'm currently working on the Call of Duty franchise. So when I started talking about that on Twitch, I started kind of seeing a lot more people asking about it, and then asking about how to be able to make their streams more accessible. And I really kind of it was just diving in, because I was already making content that was accessible to begin with. I just started utilizing that in my streams, whether it's adding captions or whenever I'm posting social clips, making sure those had subtitles, or also alt text for images, so that blind users can be able to know what the image actually is, and then also being able to be open for any request that happens, or any question that happens in chat about accessibility. It's being able to just pause and just sort of and then answer those questions, and then keep playing the game, but also using the game as kind of an example too. Like, here's what it could do, and here's what it'd be great if they did this better or that better, or it's great that they do this and this. So it's kind of turned into like a combination of a bunch of different things that I love, and just and I got to use that all on Twitch for sure.
I love that. It's interesting, because when you look at a lot of the conversations that happen on the internet, let's just say gaming, or the gaming community, is quite polarized, I would say, when it comes to concepts of accessibility. Like there were the debates happening when it comes to, what was it, like marking ledges or climbing areas in certain ways visually, like with yellow paint. Yeah. They're like, well, how dare you do this thing that ruins our gaming experience and stuff like that. But it's similar, I think, in comparison to when you're broadcasting on Twitch. The assumption is that you have the opportunity to reach a global audience. And so if you're keeping that in mind, you want to be thinking, how can I make my show the best it possibly can be for any potential audience member that may step in? This may be a person who may need an accessibility toolkit, or some means to access or enjoy your show that's a little bit different than what you may be used to. So you have to think through these considerations of, what audience am I wanting to have come in? Am I creating a show that's accessible? And all of those things. It's just like, by gatekeeping or saying, I'm not going to deliver to those audiences, you're just putting a roof over your head and saying, I will not deliver to those crews. And I think that's something that we really have to think about as we're broadcasting. I know there was a question that came in from InQ regarding closed captions. I know a lot of broadcasters are starting to include closed captioning. You can ingest it directly from OBS and it will, you can toggle it on or off as a viewer. I guess, what are your thoughts on, like, is there a great toolkit that like you're using currently, let's just say even on your OBS, that's like, hey, this is easy to set up, reads from the mic, etc., like for closed captionings, just to open that door for viewers who may want to have it on? Is there like anything you could recommend in that line?
I think the one that I personally recommend the most is, as you mentioned, there is a plugin that you can be able to use in OBS called like Cloud Caption or Cloud Caption plugin. It uses the Google API to auto transcribe everything that's being said, and you can select the source of where it's transcribing from, and it's pretty accurate. It's probably the most accurate I've ever seen. I don't no shade on YouTube, but we literally call their auto captions craptions because they're just how bad they can be. But with this, it is extremely accurate. And what's great about that plugin is it is sort of a setup and just for set it, forget it, because you can do so much more with it. You can actually, it does ingest into, like you said, the Twitch player. So anytime that I stream, basically you can see the little closed caption button on the player, and you click that and it's pulling in that information from OBS. So you don't need an extension on Twitch to be able to do it. But what's also great too is that you can be able to save the subtitle file. So if you want to be able to download that VOD and edit it, and you want to be able to have add captions to it, we already have a subtitle file that you can just insert into your editor or import it, and then it will have everything that you said, and it will basically add that as a subtitle track. But what's great too is that even if you do create clips or highlights once the VOD is done, it will save that captions as well. So it's like I said, it's literally kind of a set it and forget it. And you can also see how well it does when you're actually talking, and you can see how accurate it can be. And you can just sort of set it even just like, hey, once you start broadcasting or even start recording, it'll just start and it'll just do it all for you. That's probably the one I recommend the most. For those who are not necessarily using OBS, there are a few other sort of like web-based caption software that is out there, ingesting sort of Google Meets and kind of creating that as a sort of an overlay, a browser overlay that you can be able to bring it, especially if you have like multiple folks on. You can be able to have them basically like they'll have their own sort of speaker tag, and you can be able to see or hear exactly what is being said and see it pull up on there, and you can just add that as a browser source if you're using something like Streamlabs or anything like that. But if you're using OBS, that is the one plugin that I always recommend. It's just OBS Cloud Captions, and that's the one that I've been using now for probably about a year, and it works great.
I love it. And some of the folks were, taking notes on what we were highlighting there. And I do want to address a particular viewer here. Turtle Verified and Geo are kind of naysayers currently during today's show. I want to call attention to what they're highlighting is like, why are we listening to the two of us today? And who are we to give advice? And this is what I want to say to every broadcaster out there is there are broadcasters of all walks of life from all corners of the world. You will not know every single broadcaster that's been out there or who's popular. In fact, who you think is popular is likely unpopular in most other countries. When you think about it, celebrity exists in certain areas. And for both of us, we've had professional careers that have carried, for both of us, 20 years. And so there's an importance when you think of who you listen to, who you don't listen to. You all have the choice on the internet, what streams you watch, what you don't watch. You are the viewer who can make that choice. And so I just want you to, give and encourage the peers around you, all of the other broadcasters here, listen to their insights. You may learn something. You may learn something from somebody else in the chat today. So I would love to dive into sort of, how you're approaching, to get back on topic, the accessibility conversation. You launched a new show when it comes to the Dungeons and Dragons space. I'd love for you to talk about that. a little bit here.
Yeah. So actually, funny enough, I am wearing the brand new merch shirt. It's for a show that I do called Dungeons and Disableds. I've been a fan of the TTRPG space for a long time. Kind of going back into our experience in the space. I had actually an actual play podcast back in 2012 before they really kind of became a popular thing. I don't want to say I pioneered it because I definitely didn't, but it was like that's where we kind of were able to jump into the TTRPG space. So I've had experience in that. And I love watching all the actual play that is sort of blown up on Twitch and just on YouTube in general as well, or just in podcasting in general as well. And I kept seeing that there wasn't really a lot of space for folks who are disabled, whether that's seeing disabled representation as far as players, but also in regards to characters as well. I remember I think probably the only time first time I saw that actually being displayed was actually in Critical Role when Matt had introduced an NPC that was in a wheelchair and was using a homebrew mechanic that was created by Mark Thompson called the Combat Wheelchair, and it basically utilizes everything within all the mechanics of D&D and kind of integrate that into a wheelchair that is usable by NPCs. But a lot of folks had like different sort of opinions about it and different questions about it. But I was like, I still didn't see any representation of that. So I was like, you know what? I want to be able to try to not only be able to create a space that is representative of the folks in the community who just love playing D&D and just love great stories, and also represent characters who are also disabled, but just being able to have also an accessible a D&D show as well. And so the idea I've had for like 2 years was, just literally just the name, Dungeons and Disableds. And the only rule I had was that, okay, this cast has to be disabled, and I will be the dungeon master. And I've had that idea for about 2 years, and then as kismet as it would happen, I got to meet Matt Mercer at the Game Awards this past December, and I asked him for advice, like, how do you run that at the table? And he gave me such encouragement and advice. For like we talked for like quite a while, and it was so inspirational in that moment that I was like, okay, I've been thinking about this for 2 years. I need to make this happen. So beginning of this year, I made plans to be able to start the show, and now it's a thing. It started. Our first episode launched last Wednesday, and we're basically going to be doing sort of Dimension 20 style, where we're going to have it's a bunch of different adventures, and they're all each episode is about an hour, and there's about 4 or 5 episodes per adventure. So that way it's a little bit easier to be able to consume, and then so you don't have to worry about like subscribing to a long form campaign. And then the cool thing is, like, basically get to rotate a cast of players who are also disabled in the space, that so people can be able to know them, and they get to create characters who are disabled in the space. And so it's a really great time, and I am absolutely having a blast with it, and I'm just it's been going great so far.
Yeah, I mean, the premiere was huge. You had a great tune in. That was huge to watch. A lot of folks come through, and I love the space that you're creating with a show like this, because when we think of a lot of what we see visibly on Twitch, a lot of it is art imitating art. And I will just say that when you tune into most broadcasts, when you look at the layouts, when you look at their setups, I saw somebody mention like the Pikachu and like the games and stuff that I have behind my setup. You have a similar with like Xbox and Master Chief and crew. And it's like, when you think of what we showcase on our shows, there's a lot of similarities that we have to how we execute. And when people say, oh, well, it's tough for people to discover me, having that little extra flavor of this is what I stand for, this is my purpose, this is the spin I'm putting on the show, is how an audience is actually going to attach themselves to you and continue to watch your programming, potentially support in other means. That's how that can occur. And by having like the little cues, that opens the conversation. So the Pikachu, obviously Pokemon will pop for me. Seeing the Xbox logo, okay, great. Yeah, let's talk about some of those early Xbox games or LAN parties and experiences. We have the introductions, but to get a person hooked onto you, you need to think more about that purpose statement of, well, why am I doing this show? And how am I doing this show differently than the other executions that have happened prior to it? And so I love that with your show, you're approaching it with that intent of, yeah, there's lots of great D&D shows, but let's tell it in this way.
Yeah, I always say that for anyone that wants to jump into the content creation world and become a content creator, as that is sort of seen as a career path that people can be able to take, and they're like, well, I don't really have like I'm not like huge like a Pokimane or Shroud or even just us here, but I always say, and I always tell my, like when I was teaching, I was always told my students, and this is something that my dad taught me, was if you're interested, you'll be interesting. And it really highlights that if you have a passion about something, there is going to be an audience for it, and you will be seen as interesting to that audience. Whether it's, like you said, it's Pokemon, whether it's Star Trek, whether it's Xbox, whether it's God of War, no matter what, like even if it's cars or sports, or even sewing, like whatever it is that you're interested in, there is that, when you talk about it, there is that innate passion that comes across. Like people can smell the bullshit whenever you're sort of talking about stuff that you don't know anything about. But when you're talking about something that you're extremely passionate about and something that you love to talk about, that comes across, and that makes you more interesting. That's why I always say, like for those jumping, even just streaming on Twitch, you don't have to stream games if you don't want to. It's not people are tuning in not for the games; they're tuning in for you. They're tuning in for the personality, you as a person, you as a unique a perspective on what it is that you're talking about or that you're streaming. Sure, yeah, the game is what brings people in to say, oh, this person's playing a Call of Duty right now. I should, I want to see what they're like. And then they jump in, they're like, oh, I like this person. I want to be able to see what more content they have. And you find that basically that day was the first day they played Call of Duty, but they've been an Apex Legends person, or they've just been jumping in, like they've been doing just chatting for a long time. You never know. But because you're interested in that person, now you're interested in their content. So when you're starting off, it's like, find the thing that you're interested and passionate about, because guaranteed there will be an audience out there that will find you interesting in what you're talking about.
That's right. And there was actually, like, as you're highlighting there, folks, like there's major established broadcasters, or like what we look to, like the Pokies of the world, or like the XQCs, like folks who have like the massive audiences, right? And this is something that, like, honestly, I see a lot when it comes into like our chat room. People are like, well, I'm a small streamer, or like, I'm not at that level.
I'm just saying, never say you're a small streamer. You're a streamer. It doesn't matter how big or how small you are. You're a streamer, period.
that. And it's like, remove small streamer from your vocabulary. It means nothing. And I usually highlight this like based on like followerships, rather, or like on YouTube it'd be called like subscriberships. There's a lot of people out there that have millions or hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and when you look at their average viewer, it ain't it, right? They're not millions of viewers there watching them. So this is where we start to like really start to internalize, well, what matters when it comes to the show? And it really is, well, who's showing up, who's supporting directly. If that's 10 people, wonderful. If it's one person, great. If it's 300,000, whatever it is, whoever's showing up, that is what is important to your base, and really focusing hard on that. So I want to encourage every person here to really start to rethink how we think about the space of who's large, who's small. Like, no, we're all creators. Every time we go live, we're on the same playing field. It's a matter of what are we creating?
Yeah, you think Pokimane didn't start off with having only just one viewer when she started? So everyone always starts off with at least having just one viewer. So and hey, and then now she's exactly where she is today. And sure, there's other factors that come into play, and it's the timing, it's it's content, it's just the kind of the personality that she is. But like it does. And at the end of the day, people subscribe to Pokimane because she's Pokimane, and she's like who she is. Like, she is a great content creator, and she's a great streamer. Same with anybody who who is big on Twitch or just in content creation in general. It's they started off with at least one viewer, and then they grew that. So why can't you? Why do you have to put yourself in that sort of like that comparison? Like, you can do that same thing.
Yeah, there was actually a comment that I want to call forward from Huffy MD that said, calling yourself a streamer means nothing unless people watch you. Now, this is an interesting one to me, because I would debate that the act of creation makes you, the individual. So like, for example, an artist who paints a painting, if they put forward that painting and no one's purchased said painting, are they still an artist? Yes, they still created it. Now, could they call themselves a professional artist or a full-time artist? Unless somebody's purchasing the painting or repeated purchases, maybe they're not at the professional level yet, but they still are the artist. And so being a streamer, regardless of the viewership being inbound, the fact is you're putting a show out there. Now, when it comes to converting an audience inbound, that's where you have to be thinking about what are the marketing levers that you are pulling as a creator to get people into your door. The service will continue to exist. It allows you to ingest, it allows you to showcase your broadcast, but there's additional work that you have to do as a performer to get people in the door, in the same way that if a major musician's performing, they're putting out their ads, they're showcasing, hey, I'm going to be at this venue on this date, buy a ticket to my show. A lot of those same things we see in traditional media apply here when it comes to building a base. You can't just create it and then hope they come. I think there's a lot of like worry there that like people think, oh, well, if I make it and they just don't come here, well, then that's it. I give up and walk away. I think there's additional levers that people should be thinking about.
For sure. Yeah. I always kind of see even just Twitch as sort of like the landing post for a lot of content creators. Like that is the thing where you are creating content from, you're streaming, like like everything that gets expanded beyond the Twitch stream is just trying to be able to get people to land back and come back to your stream and to your channel on Twitch. And I think I saw that it was Ray in the chat said, yeah, like it takes time. Like it really does take time. Like you never, like, yeah, there are definitely the overnight successes, but I think it was a Markiplier that said it's like, yeah, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. So it takes patience and it takes a long time, but there are not necessarily shortcuts, but there are ways to be able to get folks into your stream. It's like it's creating content on other platforms like TikTok or YouTube or on Instagram or whatever. It's about taking some of that content that you're already creating and streaming on Twitch, and you're putting them up onto other platforms as clips. Like I can't tell you, like over the course of the pandemic, or actually over the course of the past several years of streaming, I have found so many creators, not necessarily just because I was browsing through Twitch. It was because I found them on the platforms that I was on, and I tuned into their streams. Like I use the example of Ashley Roboto. She is an amazing streamer. I would not have known anything about her, and she lives not that far from me too. Like she's Canadian, and she's like she lives like about less than an hour away from me, and yet I had no idea who she was until I saw her clips on TikTok. But she kept promoting it, like she had like a little thing on her that showed her Twitch channel, and I checked it out, and now I'm a big fan. I saw the same thing with Sweet Tales as well. Like a lot of creators can find success from getting people into your Twitch stream by utilizing the platforms that are available to you. It's not about necessarily being like, I mean, yes, of course, it'd be great if Twitch had a better discovery platform, and it is getting better. It's much better than it was several years ago, I can tell you that. But it is something that is harder to be able to find an audience specifically on Twitch. Even if it was the best sort of discovery platform, you still need to be able to have those other places that you can be able to create content from. Because what happens if that platform just disappears? Not to say that I'm not hoping, knock on wood, that Twitch never will disappear anytime soon, but if you have those multiple different channels of content, then you don't necessarily have to rely on just the one place, because then it's like, what happens? Like then you're stuck and you have to start all over again. And hey, I mean, John, like you do, I don't know about you, but I'm 40. Like I am in that space right now.
My birthday is this week, and yes.
Oh, well, happy birthday!
Well, there it is. But I think what you're highlighting on is a very key point, because this is ultimately like the number of times that I've had to rebrand or relook at the content that I'm creating on the internet is so many, because of YouTube changing its algorithm policies, or it is highlighting a particular type of content and I need to focus on that type of content development there. Or when it comes to Twitch, like constant analysis of my belief, or at least what I've observed over the years, managing creators, working with creators, and one myself, is that every 4 years your audience is going to phase out of you. because they're also going through a life shift. If they are in their teenage years, they're going to college. They're likely going to be watching other content. If they're in college, they're going to transition out of college after 4 years. They're going to be becoming an adult or going somewhere else, or they're getting married or they're having kids. And so every 4 years, anticipate that there's an audience transfer. But when we're thinking about like how we are spending our time in creating into the spaces, this is something that you're going to have to be doing if you want this to be a career. And I assume, a lot of people who are watching, whether you are a broadcaster there or your viewer who supports another, you want to see your creator continue to evolve with you and evolve with the space, because the same stuff that we watched when we were younger unlikely are continuing to watch it. I used to, what was his name? Green, who used to be over on MTV. He was the comedian on there. I used to think that he was one of the funniest guys. Tom Green. I thought he was so funny. And then when I try to watch him now, I'm just like, wow, this does not hit anymore. And so there's things that just don't age with you. And so you have to think as a broadcaster, what are the services that are growing with you? And I saw like there's some folks coming in saying, hey, go Kick. Hey, if you want to broadcast on Kick, great. If you want to broadcast on YouTube, great. If you want to broadcast on TikTok, great. There's nothing wrong with where you choose to build your home. But then choosing the right amount of time to spend on each of the services is the key to a successful business long term. You have to think, what is the right strategy for me? Is it Instagram, TikTok reels, or like shorts and like putting stuff there, YouTube shorts, to then aid with the Twitch show? There's many different paths and equations that you can build. You just have to think, well, what is right for you? Yeah. And you can do that.
And I think as well, like I think some folks are can be sort of scared or worried about whether they made the right choice about jumping onto platforms. I mean, heck, like when there was a period of time where I left Twitch to go stream on Mixer, and then that ended, and then I came back to Twitch just or shortly after. It's like I always will say, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you learn more from mistakes than you do necessarily from successes. Yes, successes are great, but when you start to kind of like, as you said, like after 4 years, when your audience kind of like is moving into either a different phase of their life and the audience is changing, you have to you can't just sort of rely on just what you started doing 4 years ago, because you also as a person have changed. Like I know I would probably say and speculate that Ninja is probably, burnt out a lot from Fortnite, and but that's where, he started like 4 years ago and became extremely popular from that. I would even say like his audience has also moved on from just him being the Fortnite guy, as it were. So I always say, like, don't be afraid of failing. You have the opportunity to be able to try out different things. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. Learn from what you from those mistakes, and then try something else, or utilize the things that you learned and be able to move that into the next phase of that idea. I can't tell you how many things I have done in my content creation career that have failed spectacularly. Like I said, I started on YouTube in 2005. I didn't actually figure out what it is I wanted to do, which was Blind Gamer, until 2015. And I had 10 years of trying many different things that did not work. Even things that like sort of worked for a little bit, but also failed, because as a fun little fact about me is that there was a period of time where I actually played with the idea of becoming a stand-up comedian, because on my 30th birthday, I had a big, huge event, and I started to tell stories, and I on a stage in front of my family and friends, and I recorded that and put that out as a comedy album, and it actually became number 2 on the iTunes comedy charts, beating out people like Louis C.K. and Hannibal Buress at the time. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to jump into this now. I'm going to become I'm going to go into a bunch of different open mics and, start to be able to kind of my career at just, telling stories in a comedic fashion. My next show had 5 people. It bombed spectacularly. And then that lost me money too, because I had to rent out the venue for it. And but what I learned from that was just the the idea of like, okay, I know how, if I wanted to, I can put out an album. I know how to do that now. I can take that and move that into maybe potentially a next thing. Now, granted, hey, I just pivoted and went a different direction, but I appreciate and never regret those failures because it helped me get to where I'm at now. And hey, I know I'm like 40. I don't have the time to be able to make those mistakes again. So I am very selective on what ideas I can do and what ideas I want to be able to do. But as those who are starting out, probably in their teens, early 20s, you have all the time in the world to be able to do whatever, whatever, fail, succeed, whatever. And it just it just comes from like, hey, try a thing. If it doesn't work and you're not a fan of doing it, take what you learned from that and then try a different thing. You could totally do that. And so don't feel bad about it, trying to hesitate of where you want to go next, because you never know.
That and I think it's a healthy reminder to every person here. There's always the comment that I'll see on Twitter that gets a lot of broadcasters kind of fired up, which is, oh, you fell off. People will say to them, oh, you fell off. But here's the thing, internet, and you need to understand this. And it's the same with every entertainment professional out there. Your career is a roller coaster. I've talked about this on all the other shows. It does this the rest of your life. It's going to be up and down waves. You're going to get the gig, then you're not going to get the gig. Then you're going to get the gig, then you're not going to get it. And it's the same thing with audience. The line doesn't always go up. Eventually, Mr. Beast will not be at the top of viewership on YouTube. That is a fact. It will happen. They will eventually have somebody else come and climb with their viewership. It's how it works across the entire space. So you have to be part of this, is the comfortability with, you may try a thing, it may fail. That's okay. Try another thing. Does that work? Okay, that's working a little bit better. Can you tweak it and make it a little bit more attractive for viewers coming inbound? These are all things that you have to fully internalize with yourself as you're going through this, if you want it to be a professional career path. Now, here's the thing. I know that there's also hobbyists. There's people who do it on the side. There's people who like to do it for fun. Nothing wrong with any of these pathways. But if you want it to be a professional career, you have to be comfortable with knowing that it is a roller coaster. You will have highs and you will have lows.
Yeah, I had that happen last year. I can't even count out, I barely streamed at all on Twitch last year, and part of it was part of how the video game industry was, and there wasn't really a lot of consulting that was happening. So it was a very down year for me, and it was tough. When you're trying to be able to deal with that, but then also trying to be able to be on and trying to be able to create content, it definitely can be tough. And I was definitely not pulling in the views and the audience that I used to. And I think, that was kind of like the beginning of sort of the folks who were really jumping in because of the pandemic, and they were watching as much as possible because that was all that was available at the time, because we were all at home, we're either working from home or just at home in general. So I had to kind of really figure out what it was, that not necessarily it was anything wrong with specifically me, or that it was specifically the content that I was putting out there, but it was sort of okay, what do I want to be able to focus in on, and allow me actually that time to be able to analyze what kind of content I personally want to be able to create. It's not yes, you can just sort of and I can utilize the analytics of being okay, these streams did well, these streams didn't, but there is something there that I still like. It's being able to utilize those analytics in a way that yes, be able to try to find ways to figure out what is sort of popping off on your stream, being okay, if it's a specific game or a specific time of day, yes, those can definitely help with that analytics. But I use my analytics in a way that it sort of try to reinforces, or and also that kind of can pull away from what type of content do I personally want to be able to create. And I realized that the gaming side at the time was very hard for me to be able to to be able to gain an audience. So I switched over to just chatting instead. Now but then this year I'm also looking into getting back into gaming. So as you said, it's peaks and valleys. There's every content creator always goes through it, but the thing that you learn as a content creator is that you just have to be patient and weather that out. But also, it take that time when you're in those valleys of analyzing what it is that you like to do, and then analyze what did well, and then try to blend the two together to be okay, I like doing this, and the audience seemed to really like this as well. I'm gonna move forward with this, and it could be different than than anything else you've done or been known for. And but like that, but you can tell, again, it's going back to that you're interested in you're interesting, because then you can tell, the audience can tell you're much happier than you are like doing that thing that you like, than necessarily being like, oh, I'm just gonna keep playing Fortnite because that's the thing that I'm known for.
Oh man, and I see that happen a ton, where people fall into singular category and then they get locked into it. And let's say their interest in the game is waning, or even the game's viewership is waning, and then you start to see this like questioning of, well, where do I go from here? And you just have to be comfortable with being able to pivot and knowing that it may dip time to time. There was a comment from, let's see if I can find it here. I think it was Malik who had commented, not to get discouraged when your numbers drop. It happens to everyone. You just got to tweak your content a little. And now there's two components to that. There is obviously the tweaking of the content that may need to happen, is like, okay, I'm creating a show that maybe isn't entertaining, or I am maybe not paying enough attention. I noticed this, for example, if I'm playing a competitive game, I'm not engaging with the chat. So you're really just kind of observing. And my competitive play, as we're talking about our age, I feel like this is like what is it, like the care home broadcast today with how we talk about ourselves. But it's, my competitive skills are not on the same level as when I was 20 years prior. So you're tuning in for me, and if I'm not engaging, then why would you continue to watch? It may cause a dip in the content. Now that's a content shift you can do. Then there's also the other factor that none of us have any control over, and that's whether or not the viewer can show up that day at that time. Your viewer has their own life. They have their own things going on. They may have it set in their schedule of like, oh, I can't wait to watch you today, or I really want to show up and support, but perhaps they're just not able to. That is something outside of your control. So I liked a person, actually a few people had mentioned they turn off their view count when they're broadcasting. That can allow you to really create a great show regardless of the viewership. So if you're doing a great show, even if it was for a few small viewers, if they were to, new viewers were to find you, you're doing a great show, there's a higher likelihood they're going to follow and convert. So it helps you with that prep.
Yeah, I always say, like, whenever you're starting something new or you're trying something different, give it a chance, or like basically break it down to being like, okay, if 4 or 5 episodes or 4 or 5 streams from like doing that thing that you want to do, whether it's playing a specific game or creating a specific show or a type of content that you want to create, do that for about like 5 times, and then after that 5 but focus in on just that. Don't worry about the numbers, people showing up or whatever. Just focus in on the content itself, and then after those 5 episodes or pieces of content, then look at the analytics from that, what sort of worked and what didn't, and then but don't let the analytics sort of rule what it is that you like that you do next, because you'll always be riding those peaks and valleys, because numbers are never really your friend in a lot of situations. So you take that, and then like I said before, we're like, are you still also having fun after creating those 5 things? Are you still having fun doing that? Do you love doing that piece of content? Then what you can do is, okay, if you look at the analytics and you've realized, okay, yeah, I still like this, I can tweak this a little bit here and there based on the numbers, I still want to keep doing it, then do it for another 5. And then reevaluate after that, and then reevaluate another 5 after that. And it helps kind of like helping you sort of get past the, oh no, am I going to be streaming for years or creating this type of content for years to come? It helps you to just sort of see it in little chunks at a time. And by the time you all of a sudden you maybe realize that like a year has gone by and you've created hundreds of pieces of content that basically kind of all in a way blew up either your channel or you as a streamer, as a content creator. And you because you're still having fun doing it. So, and then also on the opposite side of things, like if after about like say 10 or 15 times you're like, nah, this is not really working for me, then feel free to either tweak it and move in a different direction, or just completely stop what you were doing and move on to something else. It's totally okay to be able to do that, because you, at the end of the day, you have to be happy with your content. Because you're the one making it, you're the one that's putting the effort into it. And I know that's sort of the adage, and I think John, you've probably heard this adage before too, as well, is that make something for the audience and then make something for yourself. That's right. I am not necessarily a huge fan of that specific phrase because I'm like, if you're making something for the audience, you're taking yourself out of the equation altogether. And if you're not, if you're fighting that, you're fighting the algorithm because it's something that the audience wants, then you're going to find yourself like not like burning out much faster trying to be able to do the one for the audience. So why not just do the thing for you? Because you're going to be much happier and you're going to be less stressed and anxious and burnt out because of it. And take it from me, I was hospitalized because I was burnt out from the stuff that I was creating. I legitimately almost passed out. I passed out on a subway platform. I could have fell on the tracks. That's how bad it got. And I basically had to realize that I had to find that work-life balance and find the thing that I was more passionate about than necessarily just the thing that I was just doing for other things and not for myself.
So you hit on a few good things here. And actually, Moonberry double tapped in the chat. Think about this. Would you watch your own stream? If not, you probably should change what you're doing. And I think that's something that everybody should get in the practice of. Because if you can tune into a stream and enjoy it, like I like to go back and watch my DJ sets. Especially when I'm like, oh, this is flowing well. I really like this mix. I like what I did there. I can see myself having fun. Those are fun for me to go back and watch. If it's, you know, a very dull broadcast or something that like, honestly, like the audience convinced me to do and I'm not proud of it, I think part of it is like, would you go back and watch your stream? But also, can you stomach the content you're creating? Like, are you proud of what you're creating? And that will also carry forward because there's different ways of identification of success. We were talking about different success metrics in terms of viewership and stuff earlier, but success can come from personal growth on the broadcast, not just the data and the analytics. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. I had shifted my content at one point to focus on my Japanese language learning because that is something of which I want. Like, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. I never had the opportunity to learn another language. I do a lot of business with groups out in Japan. One of my main sponsors is Sanrio. I want to be able to speak Japanese. And so I dedicated my broadcast to learning that. So whether or not the viewership was successful, I am still gaining something as a person. Same thing can apply if you're a speedrunner. If you're constantly practicing the same game over and over, and actually those practice runs are going to better your eventual big show that you're doing, that is something of which you can find as a success for you. So know that success doesn't always tie to just the metrics, the viewership, the money. It can be in personal growth, and that is a choice that you can make when it comes to your broadcast. So something to think about as you're approaching your next show. We're rapidly approaching the end of our show, though. So I do want to ask a question. It's sort of like a follow-up and like a condensing of everything we talked about today, which is if the streamers present, the viewers present could do one thing to encourage a more mindful approach to the space, whether that's considerations for accessibility, how to invite people into a community, how they're present in broadcast. Like, what is something a person could do and take away from today's show and do in other people's shows as they hop chat to chat?
Ooh, interesting. I think from a for obviously, yes, from an accessibility standpoint, yes, like as a broadcaster, try to be able to make your streams as accessible as possible, because you never know who is going to show up in your chat. And especially for those who are either blind or deaf or hard of hearing, having captions or being able to describe what it is that is happening on screen when asked is helpful and to being able to have that connection with that streamer or with that audience member. But I think as well, if you're definitely like, one thing is I kind of like to say, this is something I learned in radio as well, is that it can feel like at times when you're behind the mic that you're not talking to anybody. Like it can sort of seem like, you know that there's people out there, but they, like whether or not they're listening or watching, you may not know. So what I kind of like to say is that to help out with that is that, have a picture of like your best friend or someone that is a loved one that you love to meet, like you are so much yourself when you're like when you're talking to them, and have a picture of them just kind of like either below camera or just off to the side, and then pretend you're just talking to that person. Like that not only shows your personality and who you are as a person in real life than just on camera versus off camera, but it really kind of helps to lessen the idea of, oh, I'm on camera, I gotta be on, and just being yourself, because being yourself is what is the thing that's gonna get people to interested in watching you and showcasing your personality. You don't necessarily need a gimmick or a jumping into sort of the trending things that people are streaming in order to be able to become a content creator. You can become a content creator just by being yourself. And I know that sounds cliche, and there's a lot of people that sort of suggest that, but it's being like, there's only one person in the world that can be you, and that's you. And
yes.
So just try to be able to create the content that you want to be able to create. I know that answers the question, but it's the thing that kind of came to mind at the moment.
I think you gave a great recommendation for folks to ground themselves, because we hear that a lot. Be yourself, and it's like, well, who am I? Can be some people saying, you're like, I am being myself. Why is it not working? And so being yourself, the hope is that by you being yourself, there is a relatability factor that other people can identify within, in the same way that if you ask a friend after they went to see a movie, let's say, recent Godzilla Kong movie came out, should I go see that? If you ask your friend and they say, you know what, you should, you'll trust them more than likely than somebody else. And so it's the same type of concept, where if you personalize it to the concept of who do you trust, who would you listen to, and try to perform in that way, that you're not basically putting up an air or a falsehood of who you are. That's why placing a picture can help ground you. There's another thing that you can implement, and definitely, I know right now we have 12,000 viewers watching us. Thank you, by the way, everybody who joined us for today's chat. When you think of the scale of potential viewers inbound, you will have those that are there for you, and then there are those, sometimes coming from the internet, that want to detract you, criticize, demean, get you out, right? And I see, a few of those came through today's show, and okay, they'll go to another section of the internet because this isn't for them. But something that can wear creators down is criticism. And so in the same way that you'd be placing a photo of, let's say, a relative or a friend or somebody that you can consistently feel comfortable with, I recommend writing 5 names on a piece of paper of people whose opinion truly matters to you. And I mean, these are people that said, if they came up to you and they're like, you know what, John, that shirt, we need to get rid of that shirt. And if it's just like, okay, you know what, I trust their opinion, I will get rid of that shirt. If it's one of those 5 people on the list, take their criticism. If criticism comes from the internet and they aren't one of those 5 people, don't listen to it. And that comes from Brene Brown. Reading one of her books, she was talking about this, is what is the criticism that you will take? And she speaks about the concept of the man in the arena, they call it. If a person is a fellow broadcaster and has done what you've done, like Steve, like you grew up in a similar circuit I did. We have a lot of shared similar professional experience. If you were to give me feedback, I will take that feedback gladly, because I know you lived a similar experience to me. If a person who doesn't have that lived experience gives me criticism, I likely won't take it with as much of a regard. So same thing goes to all of you that are broadcasting. Be mindful of what criticism you're letting into you throughout this entire journey. So really think about that. All right. Well, we are at time, but I want, Steve, one more time for you to tell about your new show. When can they find it? When can they tune in and check you out?
You can be able to find Dungeons and Disableds at dungeonsanddisableds.com, or search for it on any podcast service, or it's available on YouTube as well. But also every Wednesday night, we will have a watch party where we get to broadcast the next episode of the adventure, and you can be able to jump in. We do a pre-show every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, and then we do a watch party for the episodes. About an hour long, so you don't have to stick around for a couple hours as some other actual plays are, but you can be able to jump on in, and we also will have an after show with myself and some members of the cast, and answer any questions that you have. So yeah, make sure to go check it out, dungeonsanddisableds.com, or just search for Dungeons Disabled, and hope to be able to hear what you think of the show.
Y'all go follow Steve Saylor if you haven't already. Make sure you tune into that show. Catch up with them on all of their broadcasts. I'll be live later today on /Kawaii Guy with a Nuzlocke of Pokemon Shield, which will go incredibly smoothly. I can guarantee it. Ray, we'll need your help. We're going to find somebody to raid, so keep hanging out and chat, y'all. We're going to raid another broadcaster here on Twitch. I appreciate you all joining for today's Let's Chat, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Thank you again.